For the past week or so, I have been working up the Honegger Intrada for an audition that I have coming up in about a month, and I thought it might be kind of fun to make a YouTube video talking about my approach to phrasing and other challenging aspects of the Honegger, so let's dive in. If you've played Honegger's Intrada before, you know what an incredibly difficult and arduous piece this is. If you haven't performed it, for me, I like to split this piece up into 4 different sections. So we have the opening from the beginning till 2, and then we have the lyrical section that lasts from 2 until a little after 3, halfway between 3 and 4. And then we have this sort of dance-like section that goes from 4 all the way to the maestoso on the last page. And then we have a recap of the beginning at the very end. What makes this piece so difficult is you have to be able to do so many different things. Unlike a piece that's mostly lyrical or it's mostly technical, the beginning of this piece requires you to be able to play strong and high and powerfully and with great articulation. And then the lyrical section that immediately follows this, when you're as tired as you could possibly be, then you have to play soft and beautifully and expressively with as much taste and refinement as you can. The next section, I like to call it the dance section. That's how I know what it is in my head. That one you need lots of light articulation and dexterity, and you have to also be able to triple tongue really fast. So as you can see, you need to be able to do so many different things with this piece, and it can be difficult to master all of them, to be able to transcend those difficulties and play this piece of music the way the music should go. So let's dive into the beginning here. For these opening 3 measures, what I generally like to do is start off quite full and placing each note, and then as it goes along, I like to get a little bit more forward motion going. After this, these wide interval leaps, it can be very easy to play them vertically. Da, 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 da. And so to help alleviate that, I like to think about them in 2-note groups. So the B flat to the C, the E flat, A flat to the F, the C to the G. So instead of ba, ba, da, 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 you have B, ba, D, da, D, D, da, D, da, D, da, D, da, D, da, D. Something like that. In measure 7 here, right before we move on to measure 8, I like to let that roll into measure 8. And then when you get to the downbeat, it's almost as if you have a small reset right at the downbeat before you start this D flat major scalular pattern upward. And I like to have it where it starts a little bit slow and it gets a little faster, and then it gets a little faster in the second measure. So da 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 da, and it pulls back ever so slightly at the end. What helps me again in terms of groupings is to think D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, G flat, A flat, B flat, C, D flat, B flat, C, D flat, E flat. Da da da, da da da, da 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 dee, da 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 da, and then singing it in real time. Da 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 dee da 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 dee da da dee da 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 da. It sounds a little bit kind of herky-jerky when I sing it like that, but when you perform it, you want it to be fluid, but if I think those groups in my head, it helps the motion be able to continue moving forward. Finally, we come to one of the first major challenges of this opening section, which is measure 10 or rehearsal 1, where you have this A flat to G sharp to B. So with this very large interval from the G sharp to the B, just make sure that you're playing the lower G sharp with as much intensity as you can so that you're not kind of playing it a little bit like blah and then having to reach really high up into the air for the B, but rather you're playing with so much energy that it almost feels like it's a sidestep. And then immediately following the B, I like to think about it in groups of 3. da dee da da dee do dee do dee do dee do dee do da da dee da da dee da 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 da. Ba, B. Same thing with that large leap as before. You really want to make sure you play with that lower E with lots of intensity, and then try to make sure that those octaves are beautifully in tune. Next, we have these groups again, where you're going to think da 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 da, so that it's not da 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 da. This will help you be able to play through all of these notes and use the F and the G before the high C to springboard and really set that note up for success. Ba 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 beep ba 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 beep ba beep ba ba ba. Same exact thing. So again, these groupings are very important to me when I'm performing this for two reasons. One, I really think it helps the motion move forward. And number two, it gives me something very specific to think about that helps me be able to focus on what's going to get the musical product out. And it doesn't let my brain just sort of wander and think about like what I'm going to eat for lunch later that day or something. So you continue along, you get to this piano, the measure before rehearsal 2. This piano needs to be the color of piano, but you do not have to play scary soft. I would try to focus so much more on playing with a very velvety or a very round or a very singing sound and not worry so much about trying to get super soft. The lower register already needs lots of support. And so you just want to make sure that you're not losing that support for the sake of the dynamic. In the recording I made for this video, I actually breathed in measure 19. I don't really like that choice, but I kept it because it was a good run of it. And I would rather try to get from measure 18 to measure 21 in one breath if possible. And everything is building all the way to the F in measure 21. So you have ba da dee o da 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 da. Keep it going. Da da dee da dee da da dee da. Try not to let any of these long notes lose sustain or intensity. The following phrase, you have basically the same exact idea, except it'll grow to an even greater dynamic and the line is longer and it traverses more of the register. And at the end of this, in measure 25, they have staccatos, but also under a slur. And the way that I interpret that is to not play short, but really just focus on playing separated or bouncy or buoyant or whatever word that you want to think there. At rehearsal 3, the character changes a lot. We go from this lyric, beautiful, almost soupy kind of playing to very articulate, very rhythmically precise. We don't want to turn it into triplets when it's 16th notes. We don't want ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ta ti ta tan tan tin ta ba 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 ba. We want to make sure that it's very strict rhythmically because that's what gives it the right character. For the first two measures of rehearsal 3, you're building to the forte in measure 29. And you just want to make sure that you're going to play measure 29 with as much intensity as possible. You don't have to blow the walls down, but it needs to be articulate. Maybe use some vibrato to shape the sound and give it some spin in that way. And then keep that very rhythmic, articulate style until the downbeat of 31. Here it switches to tenutos underneath everything, and I would keep these tenutos going even though they're not written. And it's almost as if you're walking very slowly and trudging along. Like musically, we've been through so much already, and it's like we're just trying to crawl to the allegro. So really, bum, 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 be, ba, 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 be, really trying to feel like you're just slowly plodding along. I also like to group these together in groups of 2. So in measure 31, you have A, B, C sharp, E flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat. I don't try to think of them as one note at a time. I like to think this note leads to this note, and this note leads to this note. And to end it, again, we want to get soft. We want that color, but it doesn't have to be scary soft. It shouldn't be so soft that we lose the sound altogether. Okay, so that's the first half of the piece, and that is a lot in and of itself already. But what we're about to get to, you have to have so much lightness and dexterity that it's almost like you have to switch to being a completely different trumpet player altogether. At 4, you'll notice we have a B flat, we have an F, a G, and a D. And for some reason, the F is not a half note, but rather it is a quarter note tied to an eighth note with an eighth rest. I've spent some time trying to think about why I think that Honegger wrote it that way and what I might want to do with it. And what I have determined is the B flat goes to the F as some sort of pickup, and then maybe there's a tiny, 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 tiny lift, and the G goes to the D. So instead of bum, 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 it's beam, bum, beam, bum, beam, bum, where it's almost like 2 little small groups rather than one longer thing. And then the downbeat of measure 60, I have learned that it's easy to play that too short. It's not a staccato note, it's a quarter note. So beam, bum, beam, and then pick up. Da 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 dum, bum, be da da. And we want it to go, all of that whole phrase is really trying to get to measure 64. At 66, we're going to treat this somewhat buoyantly. Bum, bum, beam, bum, bum. And then it switches to a little bit more aggressive, maybe. Bum, bee, bum. And it's a little bit less buoyant, a little bit more insistent. In beats 2 and 3 of 72, I try to treat as pickups musically and in terms of groupings to 73. So we transition back into the lighter, more joyful, easier sounding character. At 73, we repeat all of this again. Everything you're trying to treat it as pickups into another thing. Try to keep it nice and light. And then going into 5, we have a string of these half note, quarter tied to an eighth, half note. So I'm thinking da, da, dee, da, da, dee, da, da, da. Dee, da, dee, da, da, dee, da, 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 da. Bum, 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 bum. And those last 4 notes rather, are placed. Measure 94, it's okay to be nice and crisp and soft, and then you'll build up to that sforzando. And then I try to think about it, the sforzando as maybe like a real quick sting rather than a heavy note, and then really crisp and clear in 97. Da-dum, bing, bum, bum. And that G sharp to A, I almost think about like a 5-1 type cadence, like a timpani. Bum, bum, dum, bing, bum, bum. So that it's very strong there. 3 measures before 6, we want to try to dig this out. Nice and crisp, nice and clear. 2 before 6, nice and legato. 1 before 6, nice and crisp, nice and clear. And then the downbeat of 6 is the resolution of the previous measure. So it's related to the material before. It is not the start of the material and rehearsal 6. The groupings that follow are beat 2, beat 3 to beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 1. So da 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 dee da 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 dee bum beam bum bum, beam, da 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 da, and that kind of aligns. I've been talking a lot about groups in this video, and it's because when you try to group things like this together, it avoids playing heavy. You can play with a heavy character, but it's not heavy and stuck and plotting. Rather, you have articulation and weight to the sound, but it's always moving forward. So it's just easier to listen to, easier to play, and it's more enjoyable overall. Finally, we come to the last page, and we come to the craziest part of this entire piece. It starts off very similar to the previous section with this soft, very articulate notes. I personally breathe in 115 before the series of eighth notes, and I treat all of those eighth notes as if they were all pickups to the downbeat of 116. So da 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 da, so that it moves forward, and that music makes sense. For the triple tonguing section, there's a couple of recommendations. One, you want to try to keep it as long as you possibly can. If you start trying to hammer these notes out at any fast speed, your tongue is just going to get super tied up, and it's going to be very difficult to do. So keep the articulation long, and then what helps keep me on track is if I really aim for the first one of each group. Da-da-ga, 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 da. Da-da-ga, 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 da, and I try to coordinate my fingers and my thoughts and everything with the first note, and that really helps keep me on track and make sure that everything is coordinated. Before you practice this triple tongued, it's a good idea to practice it slurred so you can get the shape of the line you want. Da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da da dee da da dee dee da dee dee da dee da 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 da. You want to try to get that shaping as close as you possibly can, and then when you triple tongue, you have something to mimic, so it's not just triple tonguing for the sake of triple tongue. And then finally, at rehearsal 7, you have a recap of the material that was at rehearsal 4, except this is higher in the tessitura, and it has accents, and it's forte. So for me, it is totally okay to just go for it and have a great time here. It still needs to be light and playful, but it's okay if the dynamic comes up and you just have a good time with it. You've earned it by this point. At the final maestoso, the recap of the opening, a lot of the material is actually the same as the opening, so whatever decisions you've made in the beginning, I think it's fine to do the same decisions here. The scale in 152, I just try to start slow-ish and just get faster and build a little bit by little bit. Da, 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 da. So it's kind of a compressed version of what we did earlier. At rehearsal 8, we get a return of the material that happened at the end of the lyrical section. So you want to group those in those same groups of 2 and measure 157. Want to try to make this feel both heavy and arduous and moving forward at the same time. So maybe start the beginning of the measure moving forward and then kind of pull back at the end. And then at the un poco allargando, this can be heavy for me. This is like, I'm finally done. I made it. We're going to enjoy this moment and milk it for all it's worth. Bum, 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 ba. And then for the last 3 measures, I'm thinking B flat, E flat pickup to B flat, B flat pickup to B flat. So it's not just a bunch of random notes, but it's one note leading to the other note. So it's musical still, and it's not just loud. hope this video was helpful if you're looking to dig into the Honegger Intrada and you wanted some musical ideas to apply to what you're doing. If you like this style of video, comment down below what piece you might want me to do next, and I would love to dig into more music if you find this valuable. All of this musical stuff we've been talking about is super important, but if you're not set up in a healthy manner on the trumpet, it's going to be really hard to get all of this to come across. So if you want to know my thoughts on that, click the video on the screen.